Hey everybody, Uncle Mike here. Today is March 15th, Ides of March, and I got something interesting for you today. It is an interview with Hotep Jesus. And this is my first attempt at interviewing someone. So a tip of the hat to all of you out there who are interviewers. I have a newfound respect because it is not an easy skill to do. But nonetheless, I did my best for my first time, and hopefully I'll do some more interviews. I think I would like this. Um, the interview, the reason why I reached out to Hotep Jesus is because he's got a very different approach than what I do. And I think it's always important to go look at different approaches. And what I mean by that is like I got a general idea that the uh, um, the goal is to escape the matrix. And as you're going to see in this interview, we talk about a whole bunch of different things. His perspective is like, listen, understand what the matrix is, and then this is how you walk in both worlds. So I think it's a really, really good comparison. And I don't think anyone should ever follow anyone's path, but they should take information from as many different sources and then find your own. And so that was my motivation for this. I hope you guys enjoy it. Put your comments down there. Tell me what you thought, what you liked, what you didn't like, and we'll go from there. Thanks a lot. We're good. Hey everybody, we got Uncle Mike is here, and this is going to be a really, really special video. Um, so like last week, I was on a panel show of a bunch of people, you know, experts in the realm of the occult and the esoteric. I suppose I follow in that category. And there are a bunch of people who are on there, and we had this conversation, and it was a bit of a goat rodeo. I mean, it was just like all over the place, and you know, I'm just sitting back and I'm enjoying it. I'm participating anyway, which I thought that I could add some value. And for the most part, at the most part, though, it felt like to me to be this very like kind of like intellectual like conversation, and everyone's talking about this idea or these ideas of the invisible world and what it is and how it works and so forth. And you know, I'm sitting there thinking that, you know, no one's discussing the elephant in the room. It's like, what the hell are we going to do with this knowledge right now? Because you know the world's changing. You know, we've moved off of study to application. And so in the midst of this conversation, there's a gentleman in there, Hotep Jesus, and he starts saying stuff, and he's starting asking questions, and he's saying all of this stuff, and it's like I'm getting really, really drawn into this particular part of the conversation of what this gentleman is sharing. And then, you know, if you remember last week, I was talking a bit about money and currency specifically. And then sure enough, the conversation went there with Hotep. And so immediately afterwards, I got his email from the person who booked us. And I asked him, I was like, hey, man, I thought that we might be able to have a really interesting conversation. And I was lucky enough that he responded back, and he was like, yeah, let's go see where this goes. And so it is with that, my friends, without any further ado, I want to introduce to everyone. Probably many of you already know him, but if you don't, I would certainly recommend that you do. Mr. Hotep Jesus.
Thank you, Mike. Uncle Mike, thank you for having me, man. Appreciate you.
Definitely, definitely. So I was hoping we could start this. So let's begin this. And this is as much for me as it is for everyone else, because I was explaining to Hotep before the call, like you know, I live in a vacuum. I live in a vacuum, and so there's a lot of people out there who like really, really good people that I'm just unaware of, just because I'm in my own space right now. And it has since come to my attention since scheduling this call that Hotep here, he has a sizable influence out there in the world. His voice is carried, and he's able to go and communicate and affect you know, a lot of people. He's connecting with a lot of people through the internet, and so but I didn't know that. So obviously, anytime we see someone who's able to go and create and connect with people like that, that's an indication of a certain caliber of energy, caliber of message, all of those sort of things. And I don't know. I don't know anything about Mr. Hotep Jesus. So if you would do me a favor and maybe do the audience, and I'll be happy if you want me to do the same back for you, is if you could just give me like just a brief introduction, like, tell me how it is that you want to be perceived. What lens am I taking you from? Share with me anything you want to do so we can get this started.
Uh, perceived as an intellectual, as a conscious being. That's how I'd like to be perceived. I don't want to be perceived as anybody other than an intellectual. That's what I want to be known for. Somebody who is thinking outside of the box, challenging the normal way of doing things, the orthodox way of doing things, right? But at the end of the day, I really don't care. I just say that because I'd rather that than you label me as something else that's false, right? Like some people might say, hey, he's a black conservative. Like, no, don't label me as that, right? People ask me, what am I? I usually just say I'm Hotep, based upon the hotepnation.com organization. But I joke around and say I'm a reincarnated ascended master. And the premise behind that is just how lucky I was. I was born to a 2-family household, semi-affluent, and my dad was a mystic, or is a mystic, so I was raised by a mystic.
How does he feel about where you are now?
He loves it. He loves it,
Yeah.
He's very proud of where I am right now. Me and my dad are very, very close. Yeah, it's my guy.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's a beautiful thing. Do you have any children?
4.
You have children? So do you have any boys?
2 twins.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I've got 2 boys myself, but not twins. But when you start going through that process and you begin to recognize, everything that it means to be a father, and then if you can go and then reflect that and what your dad must think about you as his son, it really, you can't appreciate it until you've experienced it your own way. So that's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you can't even put that into words. There's no words man can create to explain that feeling of having a son, let alone twin boys.
Yeah.
To carry on the name and the lineage and the DNA. You just can't put that into words.
Yeah. Could you go and just a little bit deeper into the Hotep Nation?
No. The 2 things I don't talk about in podcasts, because I feel like it's just a waste of time, is what is Hotep and the Starbucks incident. But what we can do is we can go to hotepnation.com. If you're on mobile, hit the burger menu and navigate to FAQ. If not, if you're on desktop, you can just hit the FAQ at the top of the page and it'll take you right there and you'll get all your information there.
There we go. If you've not been enticed, all right. So what I want to do is I want to start with the heavy hitters. I'm going to start with some big questions and then maybe narrow down. So other people, they like to go the other way, but I want to start big. And I think that, and I'm really excited to hear where you go with this. So
always start big.
Walk me through whether it's your understanding or the model of whatever this thing is we're experiencing, reality, being in human bodies on Earth, how does that go through your lens, and how do you articulate it, whether that's philosophically or mystically or rationally or some combination? You just go to town.
Can you be more specific?
So life, experience, what the hell's going on? Are we living inside of God's body? Are we this? How is it that you make sense, in a general way of this experience of being here, being alive?
I don't give a fuck.
You don't give a fuck.
I don't give a fuck.
Well,
I'm here.
What is it?
Does it matter? It's not like you can change it if you found out what it was.
So it's
right? So when the people ask you, what is God, right? Well, there's only one word that can describe God, and that is unfathomable. You can't even take God and put it into words, right? So then you start dealing with these different theories, right? You're dealing with the theory of, are we in a simulation? Then you start dealing with the theory of, we're light beings, and we're here inside these physical vessels, God experiencing itself through the human consciousness, right? And all of that stuff, right? It's like, cool. Like, after you pick one, what do you do then, right? Like, what are
yeah.
you going to do? Is that going to change your life? Because at the end of the day, you still have to live this life. You still have to. So, if I were to pick one, I would say the purpose. All right. So let's go back to the fact that all is one, right? So if we believe that all is one, then you am I and I am you, right? So I'm experiencing myself through how you experience yourself. And our interaction is helping me understand myself, because you and I am you, right? Cool. So that means everybody on this planet is one. We are all one. We are all each other. So some people believe that if you live a righteous life, then you go on and you can ascend to the next level. Well, no. You're not separate from us. We are all one. We all have to ascend at the same time. All of human consciousness has to ascend at the same time. And then that's when you'll have the moment of inclusion, and we come back to the oneness, right? And then maybe as a whole, we go to the next level. But you can't just say, hey, I passed this course and I'm moving on to the next level. No, you're stuck here with us, bro, because we're all one consciousness. We're all one soul. Fragments of the oversoul, right? So you can go with that, right? So then you start dealing with the individual, I guess you can say, right? And you say, well, here I am experiencing this thing called life. So what's the purpose? Well, the purpose is to learn. The purpose is to create. The purpose is to, like one of my teachers told us, he said, we can't carry everybody to the mountaintop, but we got to carry some people. So in Spanish, the word pastor means shepherd. And the fact of the matter is the majority of people on this planet are sheep, and sheep need shepherds. So we got to take some of these people and we have to lead them, right? Some people are wolves because they haven't ascended. But the rest of us who are pastors or shepherds, we have to lead the people to righteousness. So if you were born like I am into such a, fortunate situation, our job is to grab the people and take them to the mountaintop so that they can have higher consciousness. So when they reincarnate the next lifetime, their consciousness will be better. You hear this thing sometimes, people say, oh, you got an old soul, right? That means you have had many incarnations, right? And some people haven't had as many incarnations, which is why they don't understand this world so much. Whereas for me, it's fairly easy to understand this stuff and pick up on things intuitively, well, because I've had many incarnations. And usually, your current incarnation is a reflection of your past life, and saying, hey, whatever your faults are, this is something you have to overcome from a past life to proceed and get better on the next life. But I don't spend time on these subjects like that. I feel like that is a complete waste of time. You can study that and have some sort of understanding, but it still is going to come back to, what are you doing with your time? What are you doing with your life? What are you building? What are you creating? Whose life did you change? Who did you help? Because even if it's a simulation, and or you believe in the Bible, you're going to be judged at the end. So you better start doing, because either you're going to be judged, or you're going to have to reincarnate based upon your actions. Either way, you're going to be judged at some point. If you follow ancient Kemet, you're going to be weighed against the weight of a feather. The laws of Ma'at. Ma'at's going to judge you. So, they're going to take your soul on one side of the weight scale, and then on the other side, I'm going to put a feather. And if your soul is heavier than a feather, you fail. This is how they did it in ancient Kemet, or this is how the story goes. So, I live my life to be light as a feather, have my soul be light as a feather.
That's a nice way of putting it. That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because this is we're having a little dance, because I said this in the beginning. I said this, like, what's the lens we should look at you? And you're like, don't you put me in a lens. Don't, but if you got to put me in a box, put me in the box. I'm like, what's your model of reality? You're like, don't you make me give you a model. So it's funny. We're playing this game. I hope people are watching this. And so it's what I'm calling, what I'm doing. I refer to it as naming consciousness. There's all these different types of consciousness, and it's like, and naming consciousness is just that. It's like when you put a name to something, and naming consciousness can be very helpful. Like at certain times, it's helpful to have a naming consciousness. This is shit you eat, and this is shit you don't eat. But at the same time, every time we do naming consciousness, we're reaffirming in a deeper part of our head that like something's separate. When I'm calling you this, that means you're not that, and you're just saying
Yeah.
the whole. But so this is where I'm interested. This is Mike's personal thing. So I like this idea. What I think is really important is understanding models, so that then we can have some grasp of what we're working with, and then you drop it. Like the whole idea of like the spoken Tao is not the true Tao. Like, it's talking about like, naming stuff. So I ask these questions, these naming questions, not so much like they matter, but also recognizing like, this is one way of perceiving, or at least a point of reference. To me, the consciousnesses which I find helpful or better is like, you gotta, the whole matrix, like going through the system, like it encourages and naming consciousness, like everything is being measured, everything's getting named, all that sort of stuff. But there's, as I said, there's a point. And so I'm mostly interested in communicating a model and an understanding, not to say that it's like the right one, I'm just saying this is the one I talk about, of consciousness and reality, for just the purpose of giving people at least a starting point of beginning to name something which you did not even know, which also has a benefit, that being consciousness. So the other ones being like open consciousness, like that's like the observation without the naming. And then the last being union consciousness, of like, okay, I kind of know this is something, and I'm open, but I'm going to blend. So all that said, so like the general way which I like to look at it, and I think this is very complimentary, is like I say there are three realities, and this is the way I'm looking. So we start with the simulation, and I just use that term not because I think it's a computer simulation. That's just the term of the times. The simulation refers to the fact that physical baseline reality, like the natural world, it's not what we see. It's not what it seems. All the ancient cultures say that. They're like, no, this is illusion. This is dream time. This is your atoms, and atoms are all empty. It's like, it's not what it is. So it's like the recognition, like, okay, this isn't what it seems. I don't know what it is. So like, that's the simulation, and it is nature before names. The moment you put names to something, you're looking out like, wow, look at that maple tree. Look at this. Like, you're applying matrix thinking to the simulation, which is fine, but I want to be able to articulate this. You got the matrix, you got matrix and a matrix. That's all man-made shit. The matrix refers to the big one, but like every culture has to have a matrix. This is a language, this is words, this is naming, but that's the least real, but it feels like the most real. And then you got the greater reality, which is whatever the hell all of this is existing in. And that's like the invisible forces and structures. Like that's as far as I like to go with it. But that being said, like that's my lens. I'm not saying it's the right lens, but I think it's a nice way of looking at things, and like meeting different ways, because we all have to have some lens. So what I'm most interested though, and the reason why I want to share this, like I suppose this is always interesting, like whenever like mystics or whatever label we want to say, people who are interested in talking about the greater reality and putting consciousness to the greater reality, that which can't really be understood. It's always like an interesting path. But right now on Earth, there is something very different happening. There is the shift of the form of the matrix is changing before our eyes. Like it's been going slow, but we're in the middle of a handoff, however long that lasts. How do you, with your with your approach, how you meet life, like how do you meet, and maybe you don't agree with me, maybe you think that something major isn't happening, but like how do you meet like what's going on in the world right now, all of this seeming like collapse of one and rebuilding of another and changing of ways of life on earth?
What do you mean?
Like, do you think, in my opinion, now is the time for people to, if there's ever been a time for people to escape the matrix. And so to me, what that means, or at least it begins with consciousness, it's always been an individual story, but right now, now's the time where it is most evident that the emperor has no clothes, that it's all fake. But like you said, most people they don't understand that, they're asleep. So how do you meet that? Do you take that approach? Do you look at this time, like, your journey as an individual in this collective one at this moment?
I don't know. I never thought about it. I don't, when I think about this moment, um, I don't think it's this moment. I think that everything that's happening right now is really a natural progression to enlightenment. I feel like I don't feel like right now is the moment. If I were to choose a moment where human consciousness would arise, I'd probably say it's going to be in the year 3000 sometime if the earth is still here. I don't see anything considerable happening in this time period at all. The communists are taking more and more control. They have slowly taken more and more control over the years. There's a lot of censorship happening, so on and so forth. I feel like if there was a moment, the moment's behind us. The moment should have happened, a while ago. I feel like the more technology takes over, the least conscious we become, the less time we spend with ourselves and our family. Even when you deal with this, social distancing thing, this is all things to pull people away from consciousness, to pull people away from each other. So, there's a force there that is trying to pull people away from each other in consciousness. And I don't feel like this is the moment at all. If we were to follow numerology, is probably in the year 3000.
So you mentioned technology, and so one of the reasons why I'm talking about like now is the moment, because there is a concerted effort of a certain new technology to be introduced into the human species, which has not been introduced before. And so undoubtedly, we've been on this merging path for some time. But like right now, there seems to be more than ever before, more than what we've known from actual experience before. Like there's a line in the sand. There's a line in the sand. And there are going to be some people who are not going to go one direction and one people who are not going to go in the other direction, or the people who are not going to go down the path that's being laid before them. What do they do? Like where do they, what options do they have? And I don't mean that necessarily physically, but
Who's
like
they?
the people who aren't going down the path of what the control system is laying out for them. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go and play your games. I'm not going to take your serum. I'm not going to go and do this technology. I'm recognizing that if I don't say no now, I never will. And there's going to be a good portion of people. But those people are recognizing it maybe for a variety of reasons. But if they're going to walk away from the matrix, which is what they're going to be asking, or at least hurdling it very difficultly, they're going to have to change. They're going to have to change exactly the way which they have been doing things before. And they're going to have to, if they're going to survive, they're going to have to look at things from a different way. And to me, that all speaks of changing consciousness. It's what I'm just describing it from the opposite side. So I find it like, there's a division right now, like between like some humans and other humans. They're going to go this way or that way. I mean, do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but that's always been like that, right? There's always been a divide. That's what makes us different.
Give me another example of when there's been a divide that's been like this like universal, like everyone is being put in more or less the same, like make this choice right now. And certainly there have been. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around it.
I mean, the introduction of politics has created division. Federalists versus anti-federalists. Um, natives versus colonists. There's always some sort of divide.
There's
Right?
always some sort of divide. But
Yeah.
this one is a little bit different because they're asking you to go and affect your actual physical body in terms of how it works inside. Right? Like, I mean, that's a little bit different than like the
But
just,
we've passed that threshold a long time ago. We
yeah,
introduced the needle for polio, when they introduced it for Hep B, for all of
you're
these
absolutely
things.
right about that.
All right, like that's why I said, like, if there was a moment, we've passed it already. Like
Right.
the last moment of freedom was like 1913. If there was, and the funny thing about 1913 is when you got the Rosicrucian and Noble Drew Ali with the Moorish Science Temple are born in that same year. So I feel like that was like the last year that people needed to rise of consciousness and see, the evil that was coming about. But I mean, that was like the real, for me, that was the last like chance you had to
Right.
preserve any freedom. But I mean, the thing is, I think people are looking at the United States as some bastion of freedom, and it never was. From the very start, you had arguments and among Supreme Court justices about what is sedition, what is freedom of speech, and what is freedom of press. There was no agreements as a whole, right? Some said you're free, like when it comes to freedom of press, they would say you're free to write whatever you want, but you're not free from conviction or indictment. So go ahead and write it. We're not going to say anything wrong with writing it, but you could be charged, and brought up as a criminal for sedition and treason or things like that, right? So Stamp Act, Tariff Acts, all types of, even the inception of the SEC is a violation of the First Amendment. They stomped on the Second Amendment. You ever heard of this phrase? You got to nip it in the bud.
Mm-hmm.
It's a full-grown tree now, dog. We missed the opportunity to nip it in the bud a long, long time ago. We're in a state right now where it's time to save yourself. That's where we are. We're in the stage of save yourself. And in saving yourself, you might inspire somebody to save themselves too, because they're going to watch how you save themselves. You see, the system is actually designed for the intellectual, right? So some people are going to be forced into the system. Others are going to be exempt from it because they're going to know how to manipulate case law. I'm going to be putting out a document full of case law that'll make people exempt from the things that the government do simply by mastering law. And it's one of the 10 Hotep commandments, master law and finance. If you master law and finance, you're exempt from all of these things in the world, right? If you, for example, Joe Biden just raised the income tax, right, on the rich. Well, people think that's going to boost the income for the government. Well, it's not, because all they're going to do is get savvy, move money offshore, move it into different investment vehicles, and be exempt from that tax. And they're going to pay less tax than they were before, even with a hike in tax. So again, the system can create all types of things, but unless you're going to sit down and figure out the loopholes, you're going to be subject to the jurisdiction. You don't have to be subject to the jurisdiction if you understand how to read the law. So some of us are going to be forced into these predicaments, and some of us are going to be exempt. I'm going to be exempt. Maybe you guys might be under the jurisdiction of what this government says. I won't be, because I have a team of lawyers that we sit down and we study case law with. So I'm saving myself, and I can't save everybody, because if I try to save everybody, I won't save myself, and I won't save my family. Now, the problem is everybody is fully and able and capable of doing this, but they'd rather complain about the Grammys or some other, things going on in their life. I'm over here building tech companies and studying law and history and exposing facts to people. but I spent my time studying. You know, if you want to raise your conscience, you got to spend your time studying, make intellectualism cool again. You know, you ask me again, what do I want to be seen as? An intellectual. Why? Because I think everybody needs to be seen as intellectual. The only reason why the government can pull this stuff over our head is because you have a full nation of unintellectual people. You have a government who has told you to social distance, wear masks, and wash your hands, but they've mentioned nothing about the immune system. There's nobody out here from the government saying, hey, you know, your immune system has an innate immune system, an interferon system, an adaptive system, the gut-brain axis, and all these things work together to fight disease. And when you put a needle in there, it skips over the innate and an interferon system and attacks the adaptive system, which throws the whole thing into a haywire, and it creates autoimmune deficiencies because the adaptive system is waiting for a signal from the interferon system and never got that signal. So now its response is completely different than how it would normally be. Like, nobody's going to explain that to you. You know, when you talk about somebody comes along with the mRNA vaccine, and the mRNA vaccine uses the RNA to communicate with the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm communicates with the DNA inside the nucleus and then back to the cytoplasm. People will say it's not altering your DNA, but they're also saying that there's not a guarantee that it won't alter your DNA. But again, you know, if you're not talking to you know, when you talk about things, like you say to somebody, hey, you know the difference between the antigen and the pathogen? No. Okay. Then, like, how do you even help that person, right? Like, how can you help these people? If people understood themselves, the government would be inept. They would be impotent. The power is intelligence. You want to be exempt from this government? Practice intelligence. They can't defeat you in intelligence. You know what they do when intelligent people enter the courtroom? They bring you in the back in the secret room and they say, all right, sign this paper. All right, you can go home. That's what they do to intelligent people. And the rest of the hoi polloi are subject to the jurisdiction of the bench, aka the bank. Now, if everybody was intellectual, the government would be rendered impotent. But people don't want to read. They don't want to learn. So fuck them.
So how does that, because you make very valid points. So the two questions I have, well, the first one is like, and maybe you could clarify, this is my assumption. You are finding the path where you're able to make your own way through the corrupt system.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to leave the system. I'm just trying to, like, I'm going to understand how the system fundamentally works. What are the nuts and bolts of it? And by doing so, then I'm not caught in the limitations of being ignorant.
Right.
So we also talked about this in the beginning. About this idea of, like, I think you used the word shepherd. And so, like, a responsibility, like, you know, the responsibility of most people are sheep, and what the shepherd of the pastor's responsibility is to, like, I got to take you to the mountaintop because you don't know. So how do you balance those two things? Like, you know, it's how do you balance that?
I don't. You see, if you want to help somebody else, you help yourself.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm a public figure. People see me. By just being me, people are inspired to be them. People are, oh my God, you changed my life. Did I? Great. Excellent. Glad to see it. But did I say, hey, today I'm going to try and change somebody's life. I'm going to rescue the world? Because when I did try that, I was wholly ineffective. But when I focused on myself, I was highly effective. You don't even change your kids by trying to talk to them. You got to give examples. You got to be what you want them to be. You have to be that, you know? It's like discipline. You can't teach discipline. You can't teach what you don't got, right? So I don't attempt to save anybody. I just know that by being an example, I'm going to save people. People just going to naturally follow me because they go, this guy knows what the hell he's talking about. I'm following this guy. I'm going to listen to what he says, and I'm going to follow his footsteps, right? So that's me being a shepherd, right? And then I just walk up the mountain, and the people will follow me, right? And I'll show them the way. And I'm following other shepherds because there's somebody more enlightened than me who I'm going to be following, like, okay, hey, y'all follow me. He's going this way, right? And then there's probably other people behind me. So it depends on the level of enlightenment you're at, right? So I don't attempt to try to save the world. I just know that my work is already doing that because people are telling me.
Very nice way to put it. And I think that like there's that balance. There's that balance of like recognizing what it is that you're doing for other, or how you impact other people. And this is true for all of us. We're always impacting people, like, you know,
Yeah.
depending upon the size, the how loud our voice is, how far our voice carries, like, you know, is the size, how far you go and you how far you can impact. But
it's for example, you tell somebody, hey, this is how you start a business, right? And they're like, or for example, you got somebody goes to school for business and they say, oh yeah, you know, you talk to the professor, it's like, professor, what business have you started? I haven't started any. How can you be a professor of business if you never started a business? That doesn't make any sense, right? So they say, Hotep Jesus, how do you start a business? Well, I can show you how. I have 9 of them, right? I've had many successful businesses over the year. I have a successful business. I am a successful business, right? So you can lead by example, but you got to see who has already done what they said. So when we talk about like manifesting things, right? It's like, well, what have you manifested? Show me, right? Believe it. Seeing is believing. So I do magic, and then people go, oh yeah, this guy's on his shit. Right? He's on his shit. I do the impossible, and people go, he's on his shit. Right? So it's part intellectual, it's part intuition. The two work together in tandem. The intuition inspires the intellectual. So I just let the see, here's the thing with the intellect and the intuition. Intuition can only speak to you at the level of your intellect. For example, if you wanted to put a rocket in space, but you couldn't do 1 + 1, intuition can't show you how to put the calculations together to put the rocket in space. You first have to bring yourself to the level of trigonometry and physics to the point where when it imbued you with the final algorithm, you go, I got it. I understand. Right? Even Einstein says a lot of his thinking, he'd space out, right? He'd sit down in a chair and he'd just completely space out. And then his thoughts would be imbued and come into his mind. It's inspired by, you know, the afterlife, the afterworld, or the other world, or the ether, or whatever you want to call it, right? So it's like you still have to work on your physical consciousness so that when the intuition wants to speak to you, it can speak to you at the level that you're at. And the higher you increase your intelligence, the higher your intuition can inspire you. So I focus on my intelligence. I focus on reading. I focus on knowing more so that I can understand more when intuition comes to me and it can lead me to higher feats. And that's just sort of how I just live my life. It's just like learn, and then execute, learn and execute, learn, execute, learn, execute, and let inspiration and let intuition inspire you. What was the question though? Because I'm sure I'm like, because I'm,
let me ask you
yeah,
this. Well, so you talked about all the stuff which you do to feed and to develop and further develop the intellectual muscle. What do you do, or do you do anything that to feed or further develop the intuitive muscle?
Well, 2 examples. One is I don't check my clock. I let my intuition tell me what time it is, and then I fact check myself by looking at the clock. Right? So that's how I know if I'm in tune or not.
All right.
Driving, you know, should I make a left? Should I make a right? Should I stop? Should I slow down? And seeing how that affects my life. Parking spots, you know, should I get this parking spot or should I make a left? Blank out the mind, let intuition give you that. You know, just little spots. You know, you can do a playing game. You know, playing video games. You could let your intuition guide you through a video game. Should I do this or that? And then like you don't follow your intuition, it's like, oh, I'm dead. I know I should have did that, right? Especially like playing games like COD online or something like that. Like it's all through your life. You just have to learn to let your intuition guide you and stop relying on the intellectual mind so much.
And what it sounds like you're doing, which it's right up my alley, is you make a game out of the developing of the muscle. Like it's
Yes.
always it should there's an
It's an
element of
exercise.
playfulness. So all right. So let's go and switch gears a little bit, and let's talk about currency. Let's talk about currency.
Mhm.
Currency is the glue that holds the false reality together. Like
Mhm.
it's and if you know that,
Currency is for low conscious civilizations.
all right. So walk me through this. So if currency is for low consciousness or civilizations, then walk me through then what a higher consciousness version would be, and I'd like to hear this.
Higher consciousness would be selfless communism,
Okay,
voluntary communism,
without a
where
monetary policy or without like
yeah,
no money.
people would just give to give,
Hmm.
right? You say, oh, you don't have here, you can have now. We have abundance of this, you can have that. The things that have value would no longer have value.
So
What would be valuable would be life, children, great relationships. That would be like the things that have value.
right.
Experiences would be of high value, as opposed to things. Wants and desires would decrease and turn into wants and desires of great experience. You'd have more giving, so on and so forth. Currency is for civilizations that deal with scarcity. And scarcity usually brings about fear. So when out of fear, you get all the seven deadly sins, and then consciousness usually sinks from there.
Definitely so. And so one of the things which I'm always intrigued by is like getting down to the foundation of something, because you understand the foundation, you understand what resonates with it. You're going to know the fruit which this tree is going to produce.
Mm-hmm.
So talking a little bit, you're talking 1913. We're talking about like when we move to the debt-based currency system on the central bank level, and like to simplify central banking to like this to the easiest way, it's like there's never going to be enough money. Like the issuing of like that first amount of money and the money supply comes with like a vig, and by definition there's never going to be enough money in the money supply to pay it back. Not that it's ever supposed to, but what that does is it creates this fundamental quality of like always chasing. There's never enough. And if you go and you look at what the current and past expression of like money is in this like debt-based system, it's like it's like always adding more money. It's always like the boom bust cycle, the stock market always like chasing higher and higher like earnings per share and so forth. And when you go and you talk to people, you talk to human beings who like who are trying to feel secure, to actually have wealth with this sort of money, like how much money do you need to feel like fully satisfied? Maybe not even satisfied. I think safety is the right word. There are lots of studies that show this. And people are never satisfied. You got $1 million in the bank, you want $3 million in the bank. You got 10 million bucks in the bank, you want 30 million bucks in the bank. And that is a predictive outcome of the foundation of debt-based currency. So the question I have for you, because is like how are you able to work? Because you're right, you're 100% right when you're like, at the end of the day, all that matters is what are you going to do in the day-to-day business, or your day-to-day business. And if you can't feed yourself, if you can't live somewhere, you can't provide for your family, then what good are you doing? So like if we're in this system, if you're in the system, you got to play with the tools which we know are inherently they won't serve us. So what is the approach that you found that?
If the money is fake, it should be easier to get.
All right, you're
If they're
absolutely right.
if they're printing it like it's going out of style, that means there's plenty for you. If we're dealing with a society which is consumer based, all you got to do is set yourself up as a seller. Everybody's already been, their behavior has already been conditioned to be consumers.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, can you recondition yourself from being a consumer to being a producer? Right. So in my book, Dominate Twitter, when people read that, they go, Hotep Jesus turned my mind from a consumer to a producer. That's what the book does. It flips that switch in your head and shows you how to become a producer. And it makes it really easy to become a producer and produce things and sell and become an online business. But it's a mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if the people have already been conditioned to be consumers, you just got to position yourself as a producer and give them something to consume. It's really easy, if the money is fake, it should be even easier to get. I could say, it was like gold coin or something like that. It'd be a lot different. People were hoarding gold coins, you wasn't giving that stuff up, and people were hoarding land and things back in the day. Right now is the easiest time to get money.
The phrase, what did you say? You said currency is the money of low consciousness civilizations,
Yeah, currency is for low conscious
right,
civilizations.
right, without a doubt. And the way you position it, like, it's fake. And I think that's really, really, really significant for people to like fully grasp, because the problem, the way that one of the ways which money has worked its way on human beings is they've tied in emotional connection to money, one way or the other, like, my self-worth or whatever. And so, like, as soon as you got the emotion tied into it, well, then it's like, now it's become a different dynamic. Now it's like something you need. But when it's fake, when it's friggin' fake, you're not like, a picture of a movie star. You don't fall in love with the picture. It's fake. I keep it on my wall and I like to look at it. And so it's like, that seems to be like going, like, one of the most significant things in terms of recognizing how you have to walk through the system. If we're going to be in the system, you got to play some of the games. You got to know what it is. But like what you just described, like to see it as fake. And then to be able to then, so it's currency. It's called currency because it is a wink and a nod to the current, the riverbank's currents. And so the current is about one thing. When you tie it to money, to currency, it's cash flow. It has to be moving. And so, like, people aren't going to like this. And so this is something else, and this will be interesting, is there's no wealth with currency. There is no wealth with currency. It's an impossibility. Like, wealth is an abundance of an asset which will keep its value or grow. And by the nature of what the financial system is, it's going to go to zero at some point. And so wealth is something else. Wealth is something else. And so currency is just about cash flow and like playing the game. So what about wealth? Can you
well, in order to understand wealth, you got to do the etymology on the word capital, which will go back to Latin capitale. Capitale was talking about land. That was real capital. Like, resources was real capital, right? So that's the game that they play. So what they do is they create this fake currency, and then they distribute this fake currency. Let me see how high I can take, how high level I can take this. So they produce said currency. For example, if we look at the Bretton Woods Agreement, and they made the United States of America tie their currency to the gold standard. And then the IMF, International Monetary Fund, was supposed to be the fund to which, the resources were distributed to foreign nations. So no other nation was supposed to be tied to a gold standard, just the United States. But the other nations, using their fiat currency, they could devalue that currency anytime they wanted. But the funny thing is they could turn their currency in at any time for gold that the United States possessed. And then, what happened was later on, you had the Nixon shock where they had to take us off the gold standard because the United States Treasury was bleeding gold. So the question is, who did this gold go to? You see, what happens is the system is rigged so that what they do is they convince you to give them real valuable assets in exchange for this fake currency. Now, once they do that, they also play the other side of the game where they take the fake currency and they make you trade that. For example, they'll come to you and say, oh, you got land here. Take this fake currency. Give me your land. Right. So now they're trading that fake currency they got for land. Then when the system crumbles, they're sitting there with all the land and the resources and the guns, and you're left with this fiat currency because you thought the money was wealth. No, that's not how the game works. Capital is resources and land. So you have to do is you don't want to hold on to money. You want to trade the money for something that actually has value, something that can actually be used. Some people often ask me, they say, what is it that I should purchase that is the best investment? And I tell them the best investment is guns and ammo, firearms and ammo. That is the best investment, bar none. I don't care, what time period you fast forward or rewind to, guns are going to either be, the guns are just going to be high value. I mean, you go look at, what the price of guns has done, over the last year. I remember you could get an AR-15 for $300. You can't even find them now. You're going to have to get a used one. You're going to have to build it. You might have to 3D print some parts. But, you want to, and then, underneath guns, I would say is land. And the reason why I say guns is because guns are going to protect your land. It's going to protect even the little fiat currency you do have or the little gold bullion you do have. You're going to need to protect it. Otherwise, somebody's going to come rob you and take it from you. And that's another thing that the oligarchs understood was when they would do this, they would possess massive armies or massive teams of security, so that if people did rebel, well, how are you going to get past that massive army and security that they have? They'll just, blow your head off. But, when we look at, John Law in France, what he tried to do with that system, and he was dealing with fractional reserve currency, and he didn't have as much gold as he said he did and whatnot. You had the same thing happening there. You had poor people became rich overnight due to speculation and investment in things like the Louisiana territory in America, which was a French possession. And, and then after that whole thing turned out to be nothing but swampland, same people became poor. But again, they were dealing in fiat. They weren't trading that in for anything real. They were buying like securities in some company or something like that. But the company was like basically a shell company. There was nothing real behind it. But the people who were smart took that fiat currency and they were buying land and building castles. So when it was all said and done, they had farmland, they had animals, they had livestock, stuff that could sustain you and your family for years to come. So when the fiat currency died, they're like, oh, well, I'm good. I got my chickens, I got my goat, I got my cow. I got a couple of people living here on my territory. We can take care of them too. They're poor and broke, so they're not going anywhere. So I can still live like a king, even though the fiat currencies are done. The other thing they were doing was swapping that stuff for gold and speculating on gold and speculating on silver, speculating on copper and all these things. So they were always trading in their fiat notes while everybody else was playing with the fiat notes. So that's how, the rich was staying rich over the course of centuries, because they tricked people into taking monopoly money for real resources.
So what's your thought on the coming currency or the transitional currency, the cryptocurrency?
That's not a transitional currency.
You don't think?
Oh, absolutely not. Bitcoin is not a currency. Bitcoin is a reserve asset.
All right. So
ask somebody to give you some Bitcoin for something. They ain't paying for a Bitcoin. They might give you a little bit of Dogecoin or something like that, but people ain't paying for stuff with Bitcoin. Nobody wants to give up their Bitcoin. It's going to go up in price. Why would you do that? That's stupid. So in order to do that, we have to talk about my modification to Gresham's law. Gresham's law says bad money drives out good money. So for example, what happened was you had bad money, aka fiat, and you had good money, which was gold. And what happened was the bad money would drive gold out of the market. People understood, hey, this is bad money. I'm going to hold on to these gold coins, or I'll just speculate in the foreign markets with these gold coins, right? Because the exchange rate might be better in France. It might be better in England. So I'll do some speculation where if I can get, for example, there was a lot of silver mining happening in Mexico. So though the gold, silver would be cheap here, right? So instead of spending my silver here, I'll take my silver and trade it for gold overseas because silver was rarer in the foreign markets. So I got more for my money over there. So the bad money was driving out the good. So where I modified is I say, Hotep Jesus' law of monetary theory says that bad money turns good money into a reserve asset. So Bitcoin is a reserve asset because what people do is they store their labor in Bitcoin. You work for this money. You don't want to keep it in a savings account because you're losing value there. So you move it to Bitcoin. You move it to Ethereum. People aren't treating these things like currencies.
So how does then that kind of tie in? Like, you were using like gold and silver as an example in the past. Like, how do you then tie that into something which has only, how does it have an intrinsic value when it is based upon a system which is not intrinsically established? Like, a gold mine is like a real gold mine. Like a data center is limited to a bunch of things.
What
Like,
gives gold? What gives gold its value?
Well, just an agreed upon.
So it's not much different than.
Gold doesn't go away per se in the same way that something which only exists like as a digital asset, though it has real implications in the physical world.
How much of your money do you have physical, or is it mostly exist digitally?
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with you. The fact.
No, I'm just saying.
How much most do I have? I would say
most of it you would say is digital, right?
99%. Like, we're already there.
Well, that's my point. This isn't new. We've already been moved to digital currencies.
We've been moved to that.
Long time ago. People don't keep dollars in a safe like they used to, right? You don't do that. You used to take your dollars and you put it in the bank maybe, and then you pull your physical. But now your money is numbers on a screen. Right. Even your USD is numbers on a screen. So when people talk about, hey, Bitcoin is just numbers on a screen, I'm like, how's that different from what we're experiencing right now? Now, the difference between the fiat currency and Bitcoin is the fact that somebody had to pay for that Bitcoin. Somebody had to risk something for that Bitcoin. When you talk about mining, right? So back in the day, you risked your life mining, right? You had to go inside the mines, you had to chip away, and you got this little gold thing. I got gold, right? Well, now you got something called an electric bill. So you had to give up something for the opportunity or the chance to win this Bitcoin. That's what gives Bitcoin its value. The fact that you had to burn a natural resource to get it. So when people say, what is Bitcoin backed by? I say Bitcoin is backed by the earth, because we had to use some power plant somewhere. That power plant is pulling its resources from the earth. It had to pull that resource from somewhere, and you had to pay your company, whatever electric company you got, you had to pay them to run however many kilowatts it took to mine that Bitcoin. Now, there's a lot of people who mine Bitcoin and never win a block reward. They're just paying. So that energy, that money is still going into the economy. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it doesn't operate like gold. It's nothing like gold. It's digital gold, which is a better way to say it, but I still wouldn't even compare it to gold. This is something like completely different.
Yeah.
Which is why I say, it's fine to hoard gold, but again, gold ain't the same as holding guns. Right? Like, if this was an apocalypse, zombie apocalypse hit today worldwide, what's going to be more valuable? Fiat, Bitcoin, gold, or guns?
I hear you. It's definitely going to be the guns when the zombies come.
Right. So when people try to compare gold to Bitcoin or Bitcoin to fiat, I'm like, man, all of this stuff is based upon people's emotions. It's all the same thing at the end of the day. It's just we're agreeing upon its value because of whatever. It's just that Bitcoin is more sound than fiat. One, because there's only going to be 21 million coins in circulation ever, and the last one's not going to be mined until like 2150 or something like that. And the fact that somebody has to spend money for the opportunity to win the block reward, which is why you have these mining pools where people are like, all right, look, let's put all of our processing power together for opportunity to win one of these Bitcoins. And then we'll split it up based upon, the mining power that everybody contributed. Right. But at the end of the day, somebody had to risk something for that Bitcoin to come into this world. And that's what makes Bitcoin different.
That's where the value originates.
Yeah.
From that. And so it's interesting because like risk is inherently like an emotional experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like you're feeling like, wow, I don't want to lose this. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a risk. It would be like, oh, you could take the trash out. So it's interesting to see, how emotion, like how you spelled that out, the emotion is tied with it. One of the things which which has always caught my attention was the amount of energy consumption, which just Bitcoin itself does. I think like they're comparing it to the country of Argentina. Is like to run Bitcoin, it's the same sort of thing. And so the electricity and energy model is really significant. And what I personally thought, what caught my attention is like, oh, that's why the same family owns all of the power plants, because they just owned all the shares of the Federal Reserve. You're going to own like the backup of all the systems. So and what I'm finding fascinating, we keep on like kind of like, I feel like we're like looking at a lot of these things. We're looking at different things, but we keep on discovering the same thing. And it seems like you have this really, really this technique, like in the most general sense of like, yeah, this is how you go and you walk through the matrix. This is how you do it. And it's like, if you're gonna be in the friggin' matrix, this is how you do it. And then with this really interesting way of then recognizing, like by doing the right thing, well, then you're going to go and inspire that in other people. Like that's just contagious. Like there are certain things that are contagious. That's a good contagious. I think most of the things they tell us are contagious, they're bad, is bullshit. I don't believe any of their immunity bullshit. Anyway, so I want to. It's been a real pleasure, and I've really enjoyed this education. So I got this one last question for you. So I want you to just like walk me through, if you have this, like what do you see the next 5 years looking like? Just in any way you want to talk about it.
I don't know. One of the things about consciousness is presence. They say always be present. I'm so focused on the right now that the future for me is whatever I say it is. So when you say, what is it, 5 years from now, it's just like, should I take time to stop and think about what the world looks like 5 years from now? Or should I just like focus on right now? I do that in spurts, right? So for example, I'm in synthetic media, AKA deep fakes. I'm in AI. I'm in crypto. So I survey where the future is going to be, and I set up shop in a spot so that when the future comes, I'm in a place where I can reap the rewards, right? So beyond that, I don't really look into the future, right? Because history repeats itself. I study the past. I study history, and I just see cycles, right? So I'm looking for where we are in that cycle. Okay? And I used to be able to spot it in things like fashion. I used to be able to spot it in things like hip hop. But I stopped contemplating on things like that because I'm just so like, and plus things have gotten so weird. We're like on this alternate timeline. So it's really hard to say where we're going to be 5 years from now, especially since they practice this accelerationism, because everything's accelerating now. Their plans are accelerating, especially last year with the huge reset or whatever they want to call it, Event 201. So they're accelerating their plans. What I do know is that, look at China. If you want to know where we'll be 5 years from now, look at where China was 5 years ago, and that's where we'll be. If you looked at China 5 years ago, people were walking around wearing masks. Well, fast forward, United States, well, we're wearing masks now, right? So if you want to know where we'll be, like I said, like history repeats itself, find a cycle, just find some place where this stuff has already happened and you can see where you're going to be. So just look at China and, so what's China dealing with? Well, you really don't have much rights. You got this mix between capitalism and communism, which we already have. You got high amounts of surveillance, which we already have. It's just going to get worse. So what's to come next? Well, social credit score. They've implemented that in China, and technically that exists now. You have a social credit score. It's called getting deplatformed for having the wrong views. It's called, for example, Gab, banned in the state of Texas by the governor. Gab getting canceled by the fifth bank in 5 months. Right? The banks are just saying, hey, we don't want to take your money, right? Because we don't like you for whatever reason. We don't agree with how you think. So you can be ostracized from society. So social credit score actually exists already. It's just informal, right? So, where we're going to be 5 years from now, take a look at China. That's where we're headed. That's why I'm setting up shop to make myself exempt, because if I tell people we're headed the way of China, people will say, oh, no, we're not. We got the Constitution and there's no way they're going to tread on me. And just like, bro, they already have treaded on you. What are you talking about? They just took away all your rights and locked you up last year. What are you talking about? Yeah, and then they're going to have the whole thing with the passports and did you have the needle or not? And the installation of DMV was a straight jacking of your rights, and tell you who and when you can travel and paying them for all this different thing and licenses, needing a license to do hair and all these different, pieces of nonsense, which can be regulated by the private market. But yeah, you want to know where we're going? Look at China. That's America. 5 years ago, whatever China was, that's what America will be now in 5 years. Actually, I would say whatever China is right now, that's where we'll be in 5 years. It's probably going to accelerate that far.
Yeah.
And then there's the dichotomy, right? Because we always got to bifurcate things, right? So we got the people like me and you who are conscious. What happens to us?
We disappear.
Technically, yes. But we're still here. It's just that we won't be seen in the mainstream. What's going to happen is you're going to have a split where you're going to have mainstream, you have underground. I think the best movie to illustrate this was Demolition Man. And it's more euphemistically speaking, but, there's people who are technically living like in the sewers underground. But that's where the freedom existed. So we're going to head into a space where there's going to be two internets. There's going to be two everything, right? So you're going to have two financial systems, two internets, two everything. It's going to be like an alt life, so to speak. And you'll have people who will exist in the mainstream way of doing things, and you'll have alt life. Then you have some people which will be hybrid, which will live between the two. And this is probably 10 years down the line, maybe more, where you're going to have like alt life. And the people in alt life are going to have to be more technical savvy because they're going to need things like infrastructure, because what they're going to do is they're going to take away your right to cell phones. They're going to take away your right to power, electricity, and water, so on and so forth. So alt life is going to be really, really difficult to live for many people. Some will live like kings. I will live like a king in the alt life because I'm preparing for alt life as it is now, right? So, and I'll try to help as many people as I can, but the resources are finite. And if you tread on me, you will be shot dead. Anyway, but yeah, we're gonna be in a place of it's gonna be, you know, mainstream, which a lot of the sheep are gonna think is the way to go, but they're gonna be controlled. They're not gonna have freedom. Alt life, you're gonna have to be underground. You're even gonna have to have like, it's gonna be two economies. So you have an alt economy because you need a way of life and a way of living. So, you know, that's where we're headed. And so then it's going to be a battle between mainstream and alt life. And that's where things really get interesting. And then that's why I said it's like the year 3000, because what you're going to see is alt life is going to slowly get better and overtake mainstream. And then we'll have the moment of enlightenment around the year 3000, where alt life becomes this like way to be.
So that was freaking fantastic. Thank you. But what I like the best, this is my favorite thing. It's like, nah, you know, I don't really look 5 years in the future. Like, I like being present, but let me tell you, 1,000 years in the future. You know what? Like, it's like that was a beautiful, beautiful way of painting it, and I like that. It's like, you know, I think that we've covered a lot of really interesting things, both tangible and consciousness, and understanding like where we are and what's unfolding. Thank you so much for your time. And I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find you, because I know a lot of people are going to, you talked about a whole bunch of different things. You talked about a book, you talked about like, you know, all of your different plays. So please tell people where they can find you.
Yeah. So if you want to survive as an alt life person, go to hotepjesus.com. Get both of my books. One of them is on the unbreakable rules of masculinity. Masculinity is a very, very deep subject. Which is why we're in the place we are right now, is because there's a lack of masculinity and the world has been effeminized, the rise of feminism. Men have been stripped, a lot of it through wars. You know, people think about the black community, what killed the black community. I always tell people the biggest thing that killed black community was war, World War II and Vietnam War. Nothing destroyed us worse than those two things. And Jim Crow does not even, it pales comparison. And then the final blow was, of course, the drug laws that I believe it was Nixon that employed, because we got addicted to drugs in Vietnam and they came back and they locked us up. So there was mass incarceration that followed. But again, when you take the man out the household, things tend to go in disarray. It leaves the woman unprotected. So I wrote The Unbreakable Rules of Masculinity. Is definitely a guide on teaching men how to have great relationships with women and how to find his peace with women. Because what I realized is what women is all a man really wants is peace. He just wants to find peace. He doesn't want stress. And then I have Dominate Twitter, which again, alt life is going to show you how to survive in any economy based upon human psychology. That book, Unbreakable Rules of Masculinity, is right now is in a curriculum in the university. I believe it's Texas A&M in a psychology course. Dominate Twitter was considered to be presented at Yale for doctors. By a doctor. Dominate Twitter was also co-signed by a psychologist who's been a psychologist for over 2 decades. And he said it's the best thing he bought. He bought several courses on Twitter. And he said my book was the best thing he wrote. The funny thing is, he didn't realize was that those other courses, those people bought my book before they made their courses, and they still couldn't get the essence of what makes my book great. They couldn't get that right. They took some of the service level stuff, you know, some of the prescriptions, and not so much the mentality. And so that's why they missed the essence of it. But he said the book is very meta, and he said he wished he had it at 20 years old. His life would be completely different if he did. So that teaches you how to turn your mind from a consumer to a producer, and it makes being a producer or entrepreneur so much easier. It's basically the formula. You know, you can take, you know, usually it takes like 5 to 10 years to really, or usually 5 years to really get going in your business. You know, you read my book, you chop that down to like 1 year. You know, it's just more experience, but I've taken all my experience of launching like dozens of businesses and shown you, here's, you know, I just cut away the meat and just give you the bare bones. Here's what's really going to matter. You can try all these other things. Yeah, cool. Everybody's going to say, oh, go make content, go do this, go do that. Nah, here's what really works. So that's at hotepjesus.com. Both of those books, yeah.
Fantastic. It sounds like, I admire someone who can put out that much information into it. So well done. And it sounds fascinating topics and very, very complimentary. It doesn't sound like it on the surface, but they go hand in hand.
They
So
do.
thank you for your time. And this was an incredibly enlightening and enjoyable conversation.
It's a pleasure, man. Thank you for having me. Uncle Mike.